3, 2, 1.
Here we go! Welcome back to Fix the Conversation. And today's conversation is going to be all about why good employees quit and what leaders miss almost every single time. And today I have a fabulous guest, a new friend, Michele Haugh. Michele, tell us just a little bit about you and where can we find you online as well too?
Yes, thanks so much, Heather, for having me. As Heather mentioned, my name's Michele. I'm in the DFW area. I'm a career HR professional. So I've been doing this my entire career. But about 10 years ago, I moved from internal corporate to providing fractional HR consulting and solutions for small and medium-sized businesses, and really have fallen in love with doing that kind of work. And I'm super passionate about employee experience and how employers can really make their employee experience better, because we know that it's really the key to not just attracting great talent, but more importantly, keeping those folks engaged and retained. So happy to be here.
Well, this is going to be a really interesting conversation because I know you have probably a lot of experience working with companies, big, huge, and large, and small ones as well too, with some of the, we were talking kind of offline before I push record here, but some of the things that leaders really struggle with when it comes to having hard conversations and communicating effectively and clearly with their employees, because a lot of people tiptoe around and they don't really say the thing that needs to be said. And then people are clear about what next steps are. So I can't wait to kind of dig into that. But let's just go ahead and dive right on in. What do leaders think is the reason people quit versus what's actually happening?
I love this question because, and you and I, we've been leaders before too, or we are leaders. So it's like, we know how it feels when somebody resigns, and your first instinct is to say, they just got this opportunity they could not pass up, right? Yeah. And you sort of start deflecting. It wasn't preventable. Somebody tapped them on the shoulder. And yes, sometimes that truly does happen, where it's a financial situation where they just couldn't pass it up, or a promotion that they just weren't going to get in the existing organization. But for the most part, it's typically not usually that. It's sort of that quiet build over time of things that slowly start to decline someone's engagement. And it's usually a much longer process. I think many folks, when they hear the news that somebody gave notice, they think it's, this is kind of a recent development. Somebody just called them out of the blue. Yeah. They just interviewed. This all just happened. Yeah. But it's not. It's a slow build. It's a slow burn. And there's so many things that could be addressed or prevent somebody from getting to that point.
So I'm curious too, I always say people leave people, they don't leave companies. And so it is most all of the time these awesome opportunities. I mean, I hear this a lot, girlfriends, friends who are in executive level positions. Oh, I just had this incredible opportunity, but I'm the friend. And I heard the backstory about how their ideas weren't genuinely listened to. It was a check the box conversation, and they felt like it was a check the box conversation, right? Yes. They didn't feel like they really could have a conversation without being judged, retaliated against, whatever. But I'm curious, with your experience and what you see as well too, what are some of those main things that you're hearing from folks about that we hear quiet quitting? And you might need to describe what quiet quitting actually is, but what's prompting that?
Yeah. So, again, it starts off typically with just something small, but it's actually really big. So when you think of somebody who starts a new job, they're super excited. They're like, wow, I'm ready to dive in. I'm excited about this organization. And that's why also onboarding is so important, because I can't tell you how many people I talk to a month in and they're like, I'm not quite so sure. So it's those little interactions that a lot of organizations sort of get wrong, where they set something up to seem like this is this awesome opportunity, but there's a misalignment with what they say is going to happen and what actually happens. And maybe they do a great job onboarding, and this is just something that has evolved over time. But typically, there is some sort of misalignment. Perhaps, again, we say we want to do this, but this is what we actually do. And there may be a big gap. Again, like you said, Heather, feeling unseen or unheard. And that shows up with people that maybe initially have a lot of enthusiasm and they start going quiet. Or maybe somebody that typically volunteers to take on additional projects, they stop volunteering. They say they've got some frustrations, and when as you mentioned, that box gets checked and nothing really happens, they start to slowly withdraw. So it's not usually one thing, but it's a multitude of things. And people are very forgiving, right? If they understand, they're not like, oh, everything in an organization has to be perfect. We're all humans. But it's when there's this buildup of things that just keep happening, that there's this misalignment, then people start to think, I don't really know if this is the place for me.
Right.
So
absolutely, they do. And of course, tying this back to conversations and employers having those hard conversations with their employees, to me, that's kind of like the early warning sign. You mentioned earlier too about how the person who used to raise their hand to take on the project or what, and now they're not doing it anymore. I always think about, okay, what conversation didn't happen, or that person was left feeling not heard, not seen, all the invisibility thing. What conversation didn't happen that made that person feel like, yeah, I'm done. I'm done. Right. And so my question to you is that, because I'm sure when it comes to onboarding throughout your career, you've had given advice to leaders and that kind of thing. What are some of those early warning signs that leaders need to be looking for so they can help make sure that doesn't happen, that people stay engaged? What are those early warning signs that you have seen in your career that could be helpful for leaders to spot?
Yeah, again, it's just when you see a change, when you see somebody that is very excited and they're more withdrawn, or maybe they stop offering ideas or solutions, but they become kind of complacent. And you mentioned quiet quitting earlier. That's usually where people are just like, I'm here, I'm going to collect a paycheck, I'm going to do what is expected. But there's a lack of discretionary effort that is put forth. And that's really key. You can have an organization that operates when people are just doing their job, but it is never going to grow or accelerate or become hugely successful if you don't have individuals that are actively expending discretionary effort. Checking the box is never just enough.
Yeah.
But when people start checking the box, and some people, you don't want to imagine things that aren't there. Maybe they've got something on their mind going on at home. It may not mean that they're disengaged. Maybe they've got something really heavy going on in their personal life. And so they are just like, for the next month, I need to just check the box because that's all the energy I have. But having those conversations, instead of just assuming someone is disengaged or assuming maybe something else, have the conversation.
Have a conversation.
And do it in a way that is safe and open and showing that you care, not like, what's going on? You're not talking in meetings as much, but say, hey, I care and I really want to hear from you. I've seen a shift and I just want to know, is everything okay? Yeah. Is there something I should be aware of? Is there something we're missing? And just having some of those open-ended questions to allow this individual to share what is going on versus making assumptions versus just, well, everybody has a bad day every now and then. The warning signs are there. It's up for us as leaders to be aware and really take the time to have those conversations.
Yeah. I feel so often, everybody is, I always tell my clients and my kids this as well too, but everybody's a star in their own movie, right? And the only person that we're really paying attention to is us. But when you're a leader, like you've got to be looking outside of your own little box, so to speak. And that can be really hard to do when you've got some pretty serious KPIs that you need to hit, and you've got your own stuff that you're dealing with at home as well too,
Yes.
along with all of the pressures and everything else. But again, I look at leadership, the highest form of empathy is truly being able to listen in a genuine way, not hear what people have to say, but like listen and respond accordingly. And I do feel like that gets missed a little bit because we're all so busy, right?
Yes.
We're all so busy, but sometimes you can be so busy that you're missing like the big, huge red flags, not just a tiny red one, but like a
Yes.
big, huge one that's waving right in front of you. Gosh.
It's so funny. I actually had a conversation with someone. One of our clients is using AI in one-on-one conversations, and not just to record. What I think is the coolest thing is they're not just using it to record the information so that everything is well documented. They actually have all of their leaders go back and run the one-on-one through a prompt that gives the manager feedback on how well they listened, how much were they talking versus listening. And it actually tells them. It's a very strong self-awareness tool. And a lot of leaders are like, oh, I guess I did do all the talking. And oh, I really didn't give very clear expectations or clear feedback, but they set it up to really kind of hyper analyze the leader, not as much as, I think everybody thinks, oh, those one-on-ones, we've got to document every piece of feedback. We might need that at a later time. But I love that this organization cares enough about their leadership and how they show up that they are, using it as a tool to educate their leaders on how they can be better listeners.
Wow, that is very cool. That kind of probably leads me to my next question about where do leaders think that they're doing a good job? So they think that they're listening. Yeah, they think that they're doing that. Where do they think that they're doing a good job, but they're actually missing the mark?
The hard thing is most leaders are in the middle. And so they are in that tough middle between individual contributors, and then they've got more senior leaders. And those folks that are in those manager level, supervisor, manager, director, it's a tough spot to be in because they don't necessarily always have agency around the decisions that are being made. They've got individuals that they're accountable and they want to keep them engaged, and they've got to also temper how they communicate things. And we see that sometimes there's this, you think your team, they're your buddies, and you just start unloading on them. And that's not a great thing. No. It's critical for managers or anybody in a leadership capacity to have someone else they can talk to, kind of share and bounce ideas off of. They've got to have that opportunity to sort of pause, because we see that sometimes they may take their frustration and just sort of unload it on their team, or they maybe are discounting things, well, this isn't my decision. This is happening at a different level. Right. I think those middle managers are just in a tough spot. And I don't think we do a great enough job of helping leaders at that level really understand how to communicate effectively with their teams and be transparent, but still being professional still.
Right. Ooh, that's good.
Yeah.
They don't have that type of training. I mean, this is the interesting thing. What I teach and train on and that kind of thing, I work with a lot of accountants and lawyers and professional services people and some sales teams as well too. And people went to school to do the thing that they're doing now. Right. So they went to school. My accountants went to accountancy school. The lawyers went to law school. The doctors went to, medical school or whatever. They went to school to do the thing. Nobody ever taught them, like, how do you actually communicate these things with your team members, your boss, your clients? That nobody ever taught them that. And it's like, oh my goodness, these types of conversations are the conversations that frankly mean are clients going to come back and work with you? Are your people quiet quitting on you? I mean, this costs a lot of money at the end of the day because we just didn't have certain conversations. So I'm also curious to what conversations do you feel like leaders should be having earlier?
If there are, first of all, no one's a mind reader. And so if there is a misalignment, it's got to be shared. And it doesn't have to, you don't wait till you get to the point of frustration, because at that point, then you're just sort of unloading like, hey, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, you did this wrong. That's never going to be positively received. But if it's just part of the everyday way that you're interacting with each other, like, hey, let's pause a minute. I want to talk to you about how this went, but here's the why behind it. So it's when you can explain the why, folks get it. And again, it doesn't have to be about you did this. Think about it as the process. There's a misalignment in the process. How are we going to fix this? So I think those kinds of conversations, most people avoid them. They don't know how to have them. So what happens is stuff builds up. Right. And then all of a sudden it becomes this laundry list of frustration. And if that's all that the team member is hearing from you,
they're out.
They're going to be like, what? What am I doing?
So,
but if you're just like right in the moment and you do it in a way that like is not anger filled or frustration filled, and again, you tie it to the process, then people are like, and the why behind it, like, hey, this didn't get done. And here's why it's so important that it gets done. What happened? Where was there a break in our process? And, and so you're not finger pointing, but you are calling it out.
Right.
And you are establishing like, this is what needs to happen. What happened here that it didn't happen? And how do we fix that for next time? So if approaching it like that is so much more effective than getting frustrated, waiting till it builds up, and then just unleashing like this laundry list of frustrations, because at that point, the person's like, I'm out of here. This isn't,
I mean, I always tell my clients, it's like when you have to have a hard conversation with somebody, you've got to boil it down to 1 or 2 points that you want to make, because you start going down, like you said, the laundry list of all the things. After point 2 or 3, you've already shut them down. So they're not even, amygdala is starting to take over, fight, flight, or freeze, right? So they're not even going to listen to anything else that you have to say. Like, it's game over. It's done. It's a waste of your time at this point, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, but my question is too, why don't leaders have these conversations?
Again, I think they're so busy. They're so caught up in trying to appease like those higher level, demands. And again, even if you're in a senior leadership role, you've got the board that is setting, you're trying to manage up, trying to manage down. I think they get caught where they just get really busy and they stop doing those little things that are huge. So what we see is they are like, I'm just so busy. They start cutting out the one-on-ones, which means people are not getting the regular feedback. They're like, we're too busy for training. So they start eliminating points where people are connecting authentically and they're building those authentic relationships. So then when somebody does see them, all they're doing is listing off all the things that are going wrong. So it's like, you've got to still prioritize and hold some of those times sacred, even when you get busy, because guess what? You're always going to be busy.
You're always. Michele, I was working with a client about a year ago, and it was a group, and the senior leader her behavioral style was she was a get it done type of a person. Like, give me the list, I'll get it done. She was very direct. I got no fluff. Like, there was no fluff about this woman. Zero. I mean, we have some fluff between you and I. There was nothing. There was no fluff over here. Okay.
Yes.
And she managed a team. She had three 3 or 4 direct reports. And three of those direct reports were, I'm going to call them people. They're people that we could easily go have a conversation at Starbucks. And then by the time it's over, it's like you've spent 2 hours talking about all the things, right? So those were her direct reports. Like, I want to love on you. I'm a people person. And the leader was like, doors shut. She actually told her team, they use, Microsoft Teams. If you want to communicate with me, message me on Teams. Message me on Teams. And oh my gosh, talk about, it was chaos within that organization and talk about the assumptions that her direct reports were making about her. She doesn't like us. She doesn't want to talk. She's probably finding somebody else, to replace us, which actually that wasn't even the case, like at all. But she didn't take the time to have those. They used to have one-on-ones, and she got so busy that she just pulled them and was like, just message me on Teams if you need anything. And on one hand,
such a missed opportunity.
And then it became this whole assumptions, they don't like me, and all of this stuff. It just went off the rails. And then what ended up happening is that certain projects that the team was working on, because they didn't like communicating with her on Teams, so they just didn't. So then their problems started to arise with the projects.
No.
And like a 90-day, cycle to get something done was now 120 plus. So they're not making the kind of money that they used to. I was just like, wow, over a Teams message versus the one-on-ones.
Oh my goodness. That is, like I said, it's such a missed opportunity, but it's also, you've got to have that self-awareness about you as a leader. And if you're that kind of person, then you need to say, look, I know I'm really direct, and I know I may come off sometimes like I don't care, and I need you to hold me accountable to that. And having openness. And I know you're a big disc fan. And when you've got a area that's maybe just a blind spot for you, that you don't naturally behave in a certain way, it's okay to say, I'm not so good at that, but help me be that person for you. And
I so wish leaders could just say that, be vulnerable, tell people, hey, I know I am super direct. I know I can come across, it can feel like I'm cold. I'm really not. I just am very task oriented, and I'm not into the having donuts with everybody around the water cooler. That's just not my shtick. That doesn't mean that I don't love people who are that way, but that's just what I get here. This is my lane that I get in. And it's so interesting when you just open up the dialogue and tell people what to expect. Like you said earlier, it's like, oh, okay. All right. It's like people can work within that expectation. It's so fascinating.
It is.
Okay. So if someone is listening and thinking to themselves, oh my gosh, I am that person that can be a little direct. I am that person who probably doesn't have the types of conversations that I need to be having with my employees. What's one thing that leaders can start doing immediately?
Immediately is sharing the why. Because if you say something really direct, or you may, even if you come across as being, angry, if you explain the why, folks can understand it. They're like, I get it. I understand where they're coming from. And it shows that you care enough to explain. So often, in fact, I did a fascinating focus group, a series of focus groups just recently with a large organization. And there was a lot of organizational change. And this basically what was communicated was like, this is what's changing. This is what's changing. This is the new way of doing things. But they never really understood the why behind it.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard to get buy-in if people don't understand why something is so important, or why we're doing this big change, or why there is this change in direction. They will, like you said, they start imagining and making up their own truths.
Yes.
So if there's an absence of information, folks, it's human nature, are going to fill in the blanks with their own story. And then if they start talking with one another, then you've got a whole series of stories that are swirling. So I say, stop the swirl,
The swirl.
Share the why. Don't stop communicating. Right before this call, we worked with a company that unfortunately had to do a few layoffs, position eliminations. They had the all hands meeting. They told everybody about this a few days ago. But guess what? They did not cancel their all hands meeting today. They could have been like, everybody's reeling. We just need them, you know what? Get back in there. Let's talk about the future. Let's talk about our priorities. Let's give people the space to ask questions.
Right.
Don't stop
Brilliant.
communicating and sharing the whys. That's so critical.
Absolutely. A couple of quick more questions here, and we're going to wrap it up. So, what is the biggest myth about employee retention?
I think the biggest myth is that you have to have a huge budget and you've got to have fancy programs and fancy offsites and big dinners and rich compensation plans. And all of those things are wonderful, trust me. But that is not what is going to truly keep somebody on board. Folks want to feel like they're valued, like they matter, like they are making a contribution. And that cannot be underscored.
Ooh, I have a dear friend. Her name is Dr. Julia Weiner. So I'll have to give her a shout out. But she has a new book. I'll have to get it to you. Michele, you would like it. She has a new book coming out in June, and it's called Pizza Parties Don't Build Culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just at a keynote of hers this past week, and she was talking about just that. Like, it's not all of the pizza parties and the ping pong tournaments and all of the stuff, even though that's great. Like, it's great and it brings people together, and those things are good, right? But if that's all you're leveraging to build culture, that's not going to work. At the end of the day,
it's great if you're doing those things, if you do the other things, but if you're not doing the feedback and the authentic conversations and all of those, guess what? Everything else looks very performative.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually makes people trust the company less because they think it's just a show.
Right.
This is just a show. They don't really care. Now, if they have a great foundation and then they do say, hey, let's grab a drink after work, or let's order pizza and we can all be together, then it comes off as authentic.
Right.
And this is a great opportunity for us to just pause, be together as a group. It doesn't have to be fancy, that kind of thing.
Ooh, I love that. Okay, I want to end on a very positive note here. What is a green flag in a leader? The leaders that you've worked with, green flags, what is it?
I alluded to it earlier. I think a green flag is a leader who is very self-aware and who understands where they have strengths and where they need help. And they're not afraid to ask for help where they need it, because nobody is perfect. Nobody meets every single leader characteristic and exhibits every behavior all the time. We all are human. But if you, at least you're self-aware enough to know that, then you can communicate better with people. You can ask for help where you need it. And we just see that as really just so helpful. But if you have somebody that's just pretending like, hey man, I've got this all covered, I don't, I'm perfect. It's like, no, that does not work.
No. Okay. So then what are some things that you've told leaders before in the past? What can they do to help themselves become more self-aware?
Well, I think hearing hard feedback is important, whether it's through a 360 review. We do a lot with 360s. We also do a lot with engagement surveys, listening conversations, focus groups. So anytime you can get clear and confidential feedback is going to be really helpful. And just also being aware enough to, read books or take an assessment to help you become more self-aware. If that's, I've taken so many assessments before, and it's always very enlightening to learn what are my strengths, but not always, but also what are your saboteurs? Absolutely. Like, what are things, just helping to understand yourself helps you help others in their journey.
I love that. Okay. So Michele, my takeaways, because I always write notes down here. Share the why in your conversations, share the why, because it's going to be really hard to get that buy-in otherwise if you're not sharing the why. And that is one big thing that a lot of leaders miss, is that they're really good about telling the directive, but what's the why behind it? So
Or
people
they skim over it and they just say, well, this is the direction we're getting from senior leadership.
Yeah.
So they pass the buck, which is not good either. If they try to act like they're just a passenger on the ship and they're just sharing the information, that's not good either. You've got to get buy-in. So guess what? If you're a leader and you don't quite understand it, then you're going to need to ask more questions, because you've got to be able to clearly articulate.
Yes.
Otherwise, there won't be buy-in and people will be checked out.
Yeah. And they'll make their own narratives up as well, too.
Yes.
And that's where the swirl. So we've got to stop the swirl first.
We don't want the swirl.
Stop the swirl. And then leaders need to become more self-aware. Like, take the assessments, read the books, find a good podcast. I mean, goodness. I mean, there's all sorts of resources out there, but just become more self-aware.
Yeah, I mean, the companies that we work with that get the highest engagement ratings, and we do a lot of employee engagement and leadership development and all sorts of like workshops. The companies that score the highest, guess who's always in those calls? The CEO, the CFO, the executives that are setting the example that, guess what? I'm a work in progress too.
Yeah.
I'm not above you. I don't, we're all in this together. And so I think, again, if leaders, not only are self-aware, but realize I'm a work in progress and I want to learn and develop, and I'm not, I've already done that leadership development class. Like, we all are developing every single day. We serve as leaders, or we serve as team members, or as a mom, or as a dad, or whatever. I think you and I spoke before the podcast. We're still learning every single day through life. And so if you take that attitude, we see where you model that behavior and people they build that trust.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Michele, thank you so much for joining me for Fix the Conversation. I know we shared some really great nuggets of information that I know will be helpful for leaders. Press play on this podcast yet again and grab those nuggets. And in the meantime, fix the conversation, and we'll see you next week.